You've entered Bookstorm. Your favorite authors are here to dive down deep into their best-selling books. Stay tuned to brave the storm.
Welcome back to BOOKSTORM Podcast, listeners. I'm your host, Kristen Civiletto, and I'm thrilled you're here. You're tuning in from 102 countries, all 50 states, and we know why, because we are bringing you the very best authors that are out there today, and today is no exception. We have thriller author Aime Austin. Welcome, Aime.
Hi, how are you?
We're so happy that you're joining us from Budapest, and so I know there's a big
Yes.
time difference. We're thankful that you are able to join us today. And we're here to talk about your newest release, His Last Mistress. I'm going to show this really
Yes.
cool cover. And I'm going to tell you straight out, I loved this book because it has a little bit of everything that is so entertaining, from courtroom scenes to crime to narcissists. And we're going to talk about all those things and dive in. I want to say on the front end, love it. It was awesome.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Now, our listeners usually like to hear a little bit of the author's background. So, if you don't mind, I want to tell them some of what you do because you are very busy. First of all, you have a podcast of your own called A Time to Thrill, and you interview other authors that are writing thrillers, which is pretty cool to hear some of those discussions. But you also have written many novels, including a series involving Casey Court and Nicole Long, and a legal thriller series.
Yes.
Now, how many of those books have you written in that series?
So there's 10 Casey Court and then 5 Nicole Long. Yes. So I may be getting out of the series business soon because it does go on. So Casey Court has 10 books. I started writing those in 2014. And then Nicole Long, I spun off because I wanted to pursue different stories.
Yeah.
So Casey generally does criminal defense work, among other things. But Nicole Long is a prosecutor, so she's got the one job. And so I wanted to sort of pursue it from that side. And then that's 5. And this one actually ties up both series because there's a lot of loose ends.
Well, what's great about this book is it's also a standalone. You could
I
just read this
know.
book and you've got an awesome story, but it also, brings in and weaves into these past stories, which is pretty cool that you were able to do that very deftly, I have to say. Now, you are formerly a lawyer. I guess you're always a lawyer, but you were formerly practicing, a graduate of Cornell
Forward.
Law School.
Mhm.
And we see all of that great experience coming to bear in your books, which is really neat. And also, you live, as we mentioned, in both Budapest and LA. So we're really
Yes.
glad you're joining us today. This is a good discussion.
Yeah, so I will say this because if you're on video, that the sun will set. So
No,
at
I
some
gotcha.
point.
We have, I have to laugh because we have seen everything on this podcast because it is partly video. So we've had animals, we've had jackhammers, we've got the whole thing. That's no problem. So I want to give our listeners a little bit of the background of what's going on in the story. And I promise I won't give away any
The
spoilers.
spoiler or the twist is
Yes.
in, yeah.
Yes. In fact, I'm going to be super careful about this one because it is very twisty. But we meet Dr. Suzanne Wolf, and she is seeing patients as a psychiatrist, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And she's heard of every kind of heartbreak, but she's got 2 women who come to her for treatment years apart. And it might be that they're linked by the same man. So this is something that she's now starting to put 2 and 2 together. She's a little concerned because she's got ethical responsibilities.
Mhm.
And we see your characters wrestling with ethical choices all throughout the story, which is also very great. Now, one of these patients is Deborah Bloom, who is a surgeon. She's brilliant. She has a great reputation, but she's also married to a man who is abusive. He is unfaithful, and she justifies his conduct throughout most of their marriage. This is nothing new that has been going on. Um, Now, at some point in the story, and again, I won't give away spoilers, he may have decided to move out. We're not exactly sure. Now, we also meet Lulu Mueller. She is also an attorney. She believes that maybe she has found real love with a man who might be the
Mhm.
same man. And he still lives with his partner. He's made a lot of promises. There's a little bit of tension there. And she's, trying to weigh what her next step should be. So we see these 2 women struggling with what to do in the face of conduct by somebody that they love that is not okay. Now, neither woman knows about the other, and Suzanne is now starting to suspect that there's a connection between the man that each of them loves and who she's been hearing about over the past several years. And really, as the plot twists and the tensions mount, we've got the psychiatrist now trying to figure out what to do. A tragedy happens, and all of this starts to unfold in a subsequent courtroom scene and scenes, I should say. So we've got a high tension, we've got all the elements of a very juicy story, and it delivers. Did you want to add anything to that background?
No, that covers it. So I will say this. I think that if people read the earlier books, and they're not at all necessary, I spent a lot of time thinking about how people get to this point. So there's some background in the other books about Lulu. She just pops up from time to time. And Deborah, because, well, she sort of pops up a little bit, much less. And you sort of get the idea. There's a bigger story, let me say this. I mean, people just don't, nobody walks into therapy like at 2 years old. So, they walk in and they've had a whole life and a whole history. And some of that is woven in earlier, but it's something that's covered in the book. But I like the fact that it's not day one.
Yes. And we get that because your characters do have a lot of depth, but you do round it out in this book, but you can tell too there's this other story going on in the background. There's some allusions to it. So I want to pick up on what you were just talking about because we do have a character who we might classify as a narcissist. And I want to talk about this a little bit because it's clear you spent a lot of time researching and thinking about this topic. Sometimes they make it appear that they've got everything under control. And, if it is under control, it's because they're to thank for it. And I want to pick up on a phrase that you used. You referred to this character and you said that this character is doing three-dimensional chess. And I thought that was a great line, right? So let's talk about these narcissists. Do you think that there's ever a point where they see things a little more clearly and understand their role is wrong, some of the choices they're making, or are they truly operating on a different realm?
I think it's a different realm. I think to be frank, I think it's just a lack of awareness. So it's very transactional, and it's very, how people, where I say about, like, especially now, I'm sorry, in California, let's live in the moment, let's, be present. I think ultimately they're just very present, and it's what works now. Did it work yesterday? No, but yesterday was a different story. Will it work tomorrow? No, because tomorrow's a different story. But what can I do today to get what I want today?
Yeah, I believe that. And this character was calculating and thinking, not just 10 moves down the road, but also 10 months down the road.
Mhm.
And so I thought that was a really interesting aspect of the story. Um, People with these narcissistic tendencies, it's almost as if nothing is too far to maintain their sense of control and to get what they
No.
need from people.
No, I think there's honestly no bridge too far. And I think that that's the hardest part that people would have with it, in the sense that for most of us, there's many bridges that are too far. But if you don't have that, whatever the stop is, the conscience, the presence of mind to think, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do that, this would hurt X, Y, or Z, then you can just barrel ahead without remorse, worry, compunction, a lot of those things.
Yeah. So there's a very interesting character, and that is Richard and Deborah's daughter, Sarah, in your story. And
Mm.
she changed how she felt about each parent depending on what they were giving her or how they were treating her in that moment. She was very given to focusing on feelings. And, from one lawyer to another, it's interesting when you have people who make choices and decisions based on feelings in that moment. And I was wondering if you can comment a little bit on this character.
So I will say this, and this is something I think I noticed in practice. And okay, so I mean, you went to law school. I Law school needs like some, I don't know if we need like psychology, or we need some preparation for dealing with people, because it's sort of, oh, well, let me say this. I majored in English, but there are people who majored in economics in college, And the thing, I took one class in economics and I was out because they were talking about people being rational about money. And I was like, if you've met any human, they are the most irrational when it comes to money. And so I think that at least when I left law school and started practicing, I thought people will make rational choices. I shouldn't stay. I should stay. I shouldn't, well, engage in crime or whatever. And people are just like big feeling bodies, like running around doing things. And then later, after there's consequences, people are like, oh, I shouldn't have married this guy, had these kids, done this crime, shot into the ceiling, like all sorts of things my clients did. And I think that people act from feelings to a much higher degree than even we would say. Like if you ask me, am I making rational choices? I'd be like, absolutely. When I look back, am I making rational choices? Absolutely not. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? I mean, maybe
absolutely.
50%, but it's not, I know we act out of the subconscious, but it's so much higher than we think. And people do spend a lot of time rationalizing actually before the fact and after the fact. But I do truly think that many people, especially when you're younger, and Sarah's like 20, 21, 22, and that's like, do act from feelings. And she hasn't yet had, I think, sufficient life experience to know that people will betray you. Not everybody does what they say they're doing. People are acting in ways based on history that you don't know about. That, you know?
I love what you said about intentionally teaching young people to think about how people respond to conflict and how people react. And interestingly, I will share this with you. I teach law school and I have my students map out all of the potential responses to conflict that human beings can do. And they range from suicide on the one end to discussion, apology, suing people, assaulting people, to murder on the other. And I love what you said because, Sarah didn't necessarily have that kind of intentional teaching because she had parents who were silently embroiled in their own conflict and not handling it well. So, where do you learn how to respond to these very strong feelings and
I'm
conflicts
not
that
even
you're
sure
capable?
most people do. So
Yeah.
I think, well, I'm not sure it's because I'm older, because I spent a lot of time in California, or I spent a lot of time with like perimenopausal women who were like that lost the filter. You know what I'm saying? But I do, as I get older, I'm meeting more people who are operating with more intentionality and thinking before they speak. So a lot of my friends, like I think what people learned in the maybe the 30s, 40s was, in your 20s, like somebody says something to you and you just respond. And I
Yeah.
think that what I see people learning, some people, not all, is that a lot of people I know are like, okay, I need to pause because the way I responded before got me in hot water, got me this, got me that. And if I pause and think about it, I will not respond that way or respond more rationally, or maybe I won't respond at all because not everything needs a response. And I don't think Okay, I think some people learn it through time, but I honestly think you can teach people this. And I think it's one of the failings, at least when I was growing up in education. I think I was just talking to my son about this. I have a son who's 15, and he's at a school in Los Angeles that has like classes, and they sit and they talk about feelings and they talk about how to respond and they talk about like all that stuff. That is not how I grew up. The East Coast in that era was not that. So I think it can be taught, and I think it can be taught much earlier. I just think there was little focus on that where I grew up and then the time I grew up.
Yeah.
Maybe there were other places where things were happening differently. I cannot say.
Probably not, because these were concepts that I didn't affirmatively think about until I started training as a mediator and started thinking about the other interests and the other perspectives. And so it was great because it was on full display in this book. As is another theme that I wanted to ask you about. There's some characters who kind of beat themselves up over not doing something sooner to intervene in a situation. And I want to talk a little bit about that because, we can't change the past. And a lot of us carry that regret with us, but can be constructive in some cases?
So I have two different thoughts about it.
Yeah.
The first is, so you were mentioning I went to Cornell. So when I was at Cornell, I'm not going to remember his name. I should have thought this ahead of time. There was a professor doing research on regret.
Mm.
And there were two sort of cohorts, one when I was in school, maybe one like 20, 30 years later. And what was interesting is that people spend a lot of time worried about regret and regretting not what they did, but what they didn't do. So knowing that, I spend a lot of time thinking about regret, because there's a lot of times in my life where I'm like, I got to make choices and I can't just like live on the regret train, because then what are you doing? But that said, I do think that it can change people's actions, um, to some degree. I honestly think it's like 50-50. So in some sense, I know people are like, I'm not going to make that same mistake again. And some don't, but some do. And they know they're making the mistake, but there are other rationalizations are around it, like whether I feel a certain way, or this person's got to be different, or I know it has all the hallmarks of that other situation, but maybe it's different. It's going to different presentation, different person, different gender, different whatever, different
Yeah.
location, but it ends up being the same. So I think that I don't know if it's avoidable. I'm going to be honest. I don't know if it's avoidable, but I would hope that if somebody has like an experience that can teach them something, that they learn to the degree that they can to minimize harm in the future.
Yeah. And part of that is maturity,
Yeah,
learning
probably.
lessons from the past.
Mhm.
But it's hard to do when you are also struggling with the shame aspect of it.
Oh,
So,
I think that's huge. The shame is huge. Oh, that's huge.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to ask you too about something else that struck me because this is something I have noticed, and I think you probably have in your professional life. Deborah is the head of orthopedic surgery. She's very smart. She's the family breadwinner. She's very powerful. But it takes years for her to come to terms with the treatment from her husband. And I want to ask you, is she in denial? Is she love blind? What was going on here that this smart, powerful woman is allowing herself to be treated like this?
I think this is also a multifaceted answer, because I've met people, unfortunately, who live like this. Just, I don't want to make it sound so horrible, but who make these choices. So part of them is like, I've invested all this time. I've invested all this money. I don't want to sell the house. I bought the house for 5 cents, and I can't buy another one in this neighborhood or whatever. They've invested the children. There's a lot of money and sort of familial ties. A lot of people don't want, I think this is interesting. They worry about being single. And the stigma, I guess, of being single for a lot of people is worse than this going through that situation. So I'm not sure it's denial. I think there's a lot of other stuff around it. And not to mention there's some cultural messages of, okay, either A, or you got to forgive. And I no longer believe that. I think that, I will say this. When I was writing this book, I had not thought about infidelity much. Like, I really hadn't thought about it. And I don't know if I regret it. It's just, it never really crossed my mind. And when I started reading about infidelity, I think I didn't fully cotton the amount of betrayal. So there's a blogger, and she talks about what she calls the oh my God, I can't say this, reconciliation industrial complex, where there's a lot of push to reconcile with somebody who has betrayed you.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. But I did notice and I would not have thought about it like other than this, that there's a lot of books or sort of talks about, oh, well, you can fix it, or there must have been something deficient in your marriage, or there must have been something deficient in you or them. And if you just work hard enough, you can get that back together. But what she talks about, and I wish people talked about more, is that you're talking about somebody who like lied and betrayed, and in many cases in an ongoing way. It's not like I spent $5, I didn't tell you. It's I spent $5 every week and didn't tell you, or I exposed you to an STD and I didn't tell you, or I spent all this money on somebody else and didn't tell you, or have a second life and didn't tell you, or didn't spend time with our children and didn't tell you. And that's a lot to forgive.
Yeah.
All that said, I think that when I was reading about it, I think that the popular culture leans toward forgiveness. And
Yeah.
if you leave, people, sure, you should leave, but then I feel like that's a short-term thing. It's like, oh, you left, that's great. But then there's a lot of recrimination and a lot of other social costs. And I think that not everybody wants to pay that social cost.
Yeah. And financial cost.
Financial costs,
And
I mean, all the other stuff I
right?
was talking about.
Oh,
Or
trust
seeing
me.
your children half the time, and then you're like,
That's
somebody
right.
did something bad, but now I spend less time with my children. I mean, it seems so unfair. And
Yeah.
I think that and their child was obviously had just graduated from college, so it was not like 40. But, there was just a lot of, let's just keep this together and let's just, do this. And also
Yeah.
she got to spend time on her job. So I think that helps a lot. I think that people do funnel their energy into something else when the one thing is not going well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I kept thinking with Deborah, I was like, there's a difference between forgiveness and having boundaries, right? Because you can forgive people, but have a boundary of no more. And I'm taking myself out of the situation, but I forgive you.
Mm-hmm.
And that distinction sometimes is not conveyed to people. And, sometimes even like a faith
Okay.
element will come into play where
Yes.
we're taught to forgive and we forgive over and over again, but that doesn't mean you're a doormat. And
Right.
so these were interesting themes that you were playing with that I thought were really interesting. Plus, it's entertaining. I know we're going deep on this discussion,
I
but
know.
it's a page turner book.
Okay.
Um, I want to also tell our listeners you do write under other pen names, and you have some USA Today best-selling books under those. Did you want to address those at all, or tell us your other pen name?
So I used to write, okay, so I will say this. I used to write romance and women's fiction under the name Sylvie Fox and Jolie Moore. I don't know if I'm going to continue to write in those genres. I used to love it, and I don't know, I will say this, people change, and I think I love it less. So I think I'm leaning more towards thriller and psychological, because as much as I love women's fiction, I think I don't write it as well as I could because I always want something bad to happen. And, and maybe that's 80s women fiction that like sort of influenced me. But I
Right.
think that if bad things happen, then maybe I need to not write those books. So I did, I wrote this book. They're they're in love. They're having a good time. His dad gets Alzheimer's. Next thing I know, they're like shopping for memory care. And I thought, probably not the right writer for this. You know what I mean? Like I do like a deeper topic. I do love some betrayal, like a little I like to write about justice, injustice, ethics, and things like that. And as much as women's fiction can be a heavy lift for that, I don't think it can continually heavy lift for
Yeah.
that.
No, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Well, we're hoping that you'd share a little bit of what's on your radar, what's happening next, and you don't have to give away any secrets, but we're wondering if you could just clue us in.
So I finished a book. I really love it. So I just wrote a standalone psychological thriller. And it's the first book I've written in I don't know how many years where nobody's a lawyer. Like, and there's no courtroom scenes. So, but it's a standalone psychological thriller. It has some elements that are similar to His Last Mistress in terms of betrayal. And in this one, it's a little bit more of a like as the screws tighten. So I will say this. What did my friends say to me because I have a friend who was I have a what do you want to call it? An accountability partner who's a writer.
Mhm.
And we talk often. And she said, we were talking about the book, and she said, "Oh, I hate it when people say he's so nice." Because that's what people keep saying over and over in this book. Well, he's so nice, even though the behaviors are a little probably less than nice, but it's always, he's so nice, give him a chance. And it's so interesting that we say these things over and over to people when I don't think, to be at my age, I don't think people necessarily deserve a second chance. And he's so nice is a cover for too much.
Interesting. All right. Well, we're going to look forward to that next one. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to direct our listeners to your website. You have a wonderful website, and it's aimeaustin.com, AIME Austin, AUSTIN. You also have your podcast, A Time for Thrill. Where do you find your podcast? Is it actually on your website? You can link to it. I think I saw
Yes, it's
it on there.
it's linked to it, yeah, and it's
Okay.
everywhere. So
Okay.
if you just type in A Time to Thrill podcast, it pops up.
Okay, wonderful. And I'll show this one more time because we absolutely love this cover. Fantastic book. We're going to wish you all the best with this one. And we hope to
Thank you
see
so
you again
much.
in the future, Amy. Come back.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to talk to you.
You as well. All right, listeners, what a fantastic discussion with Amy. You could see that thoughtful approach that she brings to her writing. It is a fantastic book. And of course, she's got so much experience that she brings to bear in all of her books. And I have to laugh because that courtroom scene, it's good. It's good. So we're going to highly recommend it. And we want to tell you about some other authors that we have coming up on the show. We have a jam-packed summer and into fall. We've got Maggie Stiefvater with the listeners, Chanel Cleaton, The Lost Story of Eva Fuentes, Susan Wiggs, Wayward Girls, Caroline Fraser with Murderland, Elma Katsu, Fiend, Christina Baker Klein, and Ann Burt, Please Don't Lie. And we continue to grow every week. We're thankful that you're sharing our links. We ask that you continue to do so. And you can find us on Instagram, on X. We are on YouTube. Just search for Bookstorm and Podcast. We should come right up. And our website, which is wonderful and has all of these episodes. And that's at bookstormpodcast.com. And listeners, we know why you're tuning in, because your favorite authors are here on Bookstorm Podcast.